right, so we're diving into some seriously deep waters with this one. Plato's Republic.
Oh, yeah.
Specifically chapter 4.
Okay.
Where he kind of lays out his blueprint for a just society.
Right.
I'll be honest with you.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure what to expect. But, wow, this is way more relevant than I thought it would be.
It's amazing how much Plato still speaks to us across the centuries, right?
Right.
His ideas about what makes society are still debated and talked about, even today.
Yeah. And before we jump in, I need to tell you.
Yeah.
I had a total aha moment reading this.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I was making coffee.
Okay.
And it hit me. Plato's ideas about justice aren't just some abstract theory.
Right.
They're actually super practical.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What kind of coffee were you making?
Uh-huh.
That must have been some strong brew.
Just my usual morning blend.
Okay.
But maybe Plato's wisdom seeped into the grounds or something.
Uh-huh.
But seriously, he starts with these 3 core qualities. A just city needs.
Yeah.
Wisdom, courage, and moderation. Yeah. And I realized those are exactly the qualities I look for in, almost everything.
Right.
A good leader.
Yeah.
A solid team. Even just deciding what to have for dinner.
That's a great connection.
Right.
And it really highlights something crucial about Plato's approach, right?
Yeah.
He's not just throwing out these nice-sounding virtues.
Yeah.
He's giving us specific roles that they play in creating a truly just society.
So it's not enough to just be wise, courageous, or moderate individually.
Exactly. Plato argues that these qualities need to be distributed in specific ways.
Okay.
For justice to flourish. Wisdom, for example, belongs to the rulers.
Yeah.
And that leads us to one of Plato's most controversial ideas, the philosopher kings.
Okay, hold on, philosopher kings.
Yeah.
Isn't that a bit much?
Wow.
Should we be handing over the keys to the folks who spend all day pondering, the meaning of life?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Plato believed that only those with deep philosophical wisdom could truly understand the nature of justice.
Okay.
And then govern accordingly.
I can see where he's coming from.
Yeah.
But I also see a ton of potential problems with this, right?
Sure.
What's to stop these philosopher kings from turning into...
Yeah.
Just regular kings with all the power and corruption that comes with it.
Well, you hit on one of the biggest criticisms of Plato's ideal republic.
Right.
It's a great example of how even brilliant thinkers can come up with ideas that raise more questions than answers.
Yeah.
But to be fair to Plato, he recognized the potential for abuse, and he proposed safeguards to try to prevent tyranny.
Okay, like what?
Well, so...
Did he envision some ancient version of checks and balances or something?
Something like that, yeah.
Okay.
He believed that the philosopher kings should be very carefully selected and trained from a young age, and they would live a life completely devoted to the common good, with no personal wealth or possessions or anything.
Okay.
He also emphasized the importance of having a system of laws that applied equally to everyone, even the rulers.
Okay, so if we're mapping these virtues onto society, where do courage and moderation fit in?
Well, courage, according to Plato, is the defining quality of the guardians, the protectors of the city.
Right.
They're the ones who defend justice from both internal and external threats.
So basically, the ancient Greek version of our military and law enforcement.
You could think of it that way.
Okay.
But Plato's guardians were more than just warriors.
Right.
They were also responsible for upholding the laws and maintaining order within the city.
That sounds like a lot of responsibility.
Yeah.
What about moderation? Where does that fit into Plato's ideal city?
Well, moderation is the virtue that keeps everyone in harmony, right?
Definitely.
Ensuring that each part of society functions properly without overstepping its bounds.
Right.
It's about individuals accepting their roles and working together for the common good.
Okay, I'm starting to see how these virtues all work together.
Yeah.
You can't just have courage without wisdom guiding it, or you end up with reckless actions.
Exactly.
And without moderation, even the wisest rulers could get carried away with their power.
Exactly. It's like a recipe. You need the right ingredients and the right proportions.
Right.
Plato was deeply concerned with balance and harmony in a just society.
Okay.
And this is where his ideas about education become really crucial.
Now, this is the part that surprised me the most.
Okay.
When I think of education, I think of, school.
Yeah.
Textbooks,
right.
lectures, exams.
Sure.
But Plato's idea of education is so much more than just cramming knowledge into people's heads.
He's talking about shaping the soul of citizens, right?
Yeah.
Cultivating not just their intellect, but their character and their virtues.
That's a huge responsibility. But how does he actually envision making this happen?
Well,
does everyone in Plato's ideal city have to go to philosophy school or something?
Well, not exactly. He does have some surprising ideas about the specific subjects that should be emphasized in education.
Okay, like what?
Like music and gymnastics.
Wait, music and gymnastics?
Yeah.
That sounds more like an after-school program than a curriculum for building a just society.
It might seem strange at first, but Plato had a very specific rationale for emphasizing these seemingly unrelated subjects. Welcome back. So where were we? Yes, ancient Greece's most unlikely curriculum. Music and gymnastics.
Still stuck on this. It's like Plato suggesting every citizen needs to be like a philosopher-athlete.
Not quite, but he did see a deep connection between these subjects and the cultivation of a just soul.
Go.
For Plato, music wasn't just about entertainment. Yeah. It was a powerful tool for shaping character.
Okay, I'm kind of seeing it.
Yeah.
Music can evoke all sorts of emotions, right?
Right.
Everything from joy and peace to, well, and aggression.
Exactly. Plato believed that certain kinds of music could instill harmony and order within the soul, reflecting the kind of harmony and order he wanted to see in society. Think about it. We still talk about music having a positive or negative influence.
Right.
Plato was just taking that idea to a whole other level.
Interesting. So no heavy metal for Plato's guardians then?
Probably not. He would have favored music that promoted balance, composure,
right,
and a sense of civic virtue.
Okay.
And what about gymnastics? How do you think that fits into this idea of shaping the soul?
Honestly, when I think of gymnastics, I think of like Olympic athletes.
Yeah.
Doing crazy flips and stuff.
Right.
I'm not sure I see the connection to justice.
Well, for Plato, gymnastics wasn't just about physical strength and agility.
Okay.
It was about training the body to be disciplined, resilient, and able to defend the city.
Right.
Remember, the guardians needed to be courageous, and courage requires both physical and mental fortitude.
Makes sense. It's like that saying, a sound mind and a sound body. Plato just took it to a whole other philosophical level.
And there's another interesting layer to this. Think about how we often separate arts and athletics in our own education system. Right.
Plato saw them as intertwined, both essential for developing well-rounded citizens capable of contributing to a just society.
Wow. That really makes you wonder if we've lost something by creating such rigid divisions in our own approach to education.
Yeah.
But okay, let's shift gears a bit. We've talked about the virtues Plato thought were essential,
right,
and how he saw education as the key to cultivating them. But he also had some pretty specific ideas about how society itself should be structured.
Yes.
And this is where his idea of the three classes comes in: rulers, auxiliaries, and producers.
Right. And this is where we often run into misunderstandings of Plato.
Okay.
People hear three classes and immediately think hierarchy, inequality, oppression.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't sound very egalitarian to modern ears.
It's important to remember that Plato wasn't trying to create a system where some people were inherently better than others.
Okay.
His goal was to design a society where justice was built in, where it naturally arose from how things were structured. So he's not saying some people are born to rule and others are born to serve.
Not at all.
Okay.
He believed that everyone had a natural aptitude for a particular role, and that true justice meant everyone fulfilling their potential for the benefit of the whole community.
Okay, I can see how that's different from a rigid caste system where you're stuck in your social class for life.
Yeah.
But doesn't this still limit individual freedom?
Sure.
What if someone wants to be a philosopher, but they're naturally suited to be a producer?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And it highlights one of the biggest tensions in Plato's Republic, right?
Right.
The balance between individual desires and the common good.
Right. Because in our world, we value the idea of individual freedom and choice.
Yeah.
It's like the foundation of our whole society.
Exactly. And that's one of the reasons why Plato's Republic can seem so strange.
Yeah.
And even unsettling to us.
Yeah.
He's coming from a very different philosophical and cultural context.
Right.
Where the emphasis was on the well-being of the community as a whole.
Rather than individual self-expression.
It's like he's trying to design a utopia, but maybe at the expense of some of the individual freedoms we take for granted today.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And whether or not we agree with his solution,
right,
I think it's incredibly valuable to grapple with the questions he's raising.
Yeah.
How do we balance individual freedom with the needs of the community?
Right.
Can we create a system where justice is baked in? Or are we always going to be struggling to achieve it?
Those are some seriously heavy questions.
Yeah.
And speaking of heavy,
yeah,
I've got to talk about Plato's ideas about happiness.
Right.
He has this really radical view that true happiness isn't found in individual success or pleasure, but in the well-being of the entire community.
Right. He basically flips the script on everything we usually think about happiness.
It's almost like he's anticipating those studies that show income inequality actually leads to lower overall well-being, even for the wealthy.
Like, even if you're at the top of the pyramid, if the whole system is out of whack, nobody's truly happy.
That's a fascinating connection. And it shows how Plato's ideas can still resonate with us today.
Right.
Even if his solutions seem a bit extreme.
Okay, so Plato thinks a just society is one where everyone's playing their part.
Yeah.
Working for the common good. But how does that actually translate into individual happiness?
Yeah.
What's the mechanism there?
That's where things get really interesting. Plato believed that there's a fundamental connection between our individual well-being and the well-being of the community.
Right.
It's not just about altruism or self-sacrifice. It's about recognizing that we're all interconnected.
Right.
When the community thrives, we thrive. When it suffers, we suffer.
Okay, I'm kind of getting it. It's like that saying, no man is an island.
Right.
We're all part of something bigger than ourselves.
Yeah.
And our happiness is tied to the health of that larger whole. But still, it's a pretty radical shift from the way we usually think about happiness as this individual pursuit.
It is, and it's definitely a challenge to wrap your head around.
Yeah.
But before we dive deeper into that, I think we need to explore one more key aspect of Plato's Republic.
Okay.
His famous allegory of the cave.
Ooh, yes. The allegory of the cave. That's where things get really trippy, right?
Right.
It's like Plato's Matrix.
Exactly.
We'll be right back with part 3 after this quick break.
Sounds good.
All right, we're back. And before the break, you were teasing Plato's allegory of the cave.
Yeah.
I'm ready to get all philosophical.
Well, grab your metaphorical spelunking gear, right? Because we're going deep.
Right.
The allegory of the cave is one of those philosophical concepts that gets name-dropped all the time.
Right.
But it's actually pretty mind-bending when you really unpack it.
It's like Plato's version of a blockbuster movie.
Yeah.
Full of symbolism and hidden meanings.
Right.
I always get a little lost somewhere between the shadows and the sunlight.
It's easy to get lost in the cave.
Yeah.
So the basic setup is this.
Okay.
Imagine a group of people who have lived their entire lives chained inside a cave, facing a blank wall.
Yeah.
All they ever see are shadows projected on the wall from objects passing by behind them.
So they're basically living in a 2D world, mistaking shadows for reality.
Exact.
Kind of like how we thought the Earth was flat before. Well, we figured things out.
Exactly. And because they've never known anything else, they just believe that these shadows are the true forms of things. Now imagine one of these prisoners breaks free and journeys out of the cave into the sunlight.
Talk about culture shock. That's got to be disorienting, going from a world of shadows to the blinding light of the real world.
Right. At first, he's overwhelmed, confused, maybe even in pain.
Yeah.
But gradually, his eyes adjust.
Okay.
And he starts to see the world as it truly is, with all its complexity and depth. He sees the objects that were casting the shadows.
Yeah.
And he realizes that everything he thought he knew was just a pale imitation of reality.
So he has this huge epiphany. Whoa, there's a whole world out here that I never even knew existed.
Precisely. And now comes the really important part. This escaped prisoner feels compelled to go back into the cave and tell his fellow prisoners about what he's seen. He wants to free them from their ignorance.
But they're probably not going to believe him, right? They spent their whole lives believing those shadows are real.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They might mock him, dismiss him as crazy, maybe even threaten him.
Wow.
They're so accustomed to their limited perspective that they can't even comprehend the possibility of something beyond it.
Right.
Which is kind of tragic when you think about it.
It really is. Okay, I'm starting to see the deeper layers here.
Yeah.
The cave represents our limited perception of the world.
Right.
And the shadows are all the illusions we mistake for the truth and the escaped prisoner. He's like the philosopher, the seeker of knowledge, who's glimpsed a deeper reality.
That's a great interpretation.
Yeah.
And it makes you wonder, what are some of the shadows we might be clinging to in our own lives?
Right.
What beliefs or assumptions do we take for granted without questioning them?
Whoa, that's a deep question. It's like Plato's challenging us to examine our own caves and see if we're mistaking shadows for reality.
Yeah.
But how do we even do that? How do we break free from our limited perspectives?
Well, according to Plato, education is the key.
Okay.
But not just any kind of education. He's talking about a rigorous philosophical training that helps us to develop critical thinking skills, question our assumptions, and see beyond the surface of things.
So it's not just about memorizing facts and figures, but about learning how to think for ourselves.
Yeah.
To challenge the shadows we're presented with.
Exactly. It's about cultivating the intellectual tools we need to distinguish between appearance and reality, to seek out the truth, even when it's difficult or uncomfortable.
It's kind of like that saying, the unexamined life is not worth living.
Right.
We need to constantly challenge ourselves and our beliefs if we want to grow.
And that's where I think Plato's philosophy is still so relevant today. We live in a world that's overflowing with information.
Right.
But it's easy to get trapped in our own echo chambers, surrounded by shadows that just confirm our existing biases.
Right.
Plato reminds us that the pursuit of truth requires effort, critical thinking, and a willingness to question everything, even our own deeply held beliefs.
It's a powerful message. Okay, so we've explored Plato's vision of a just society. We delved into his radical ideas about education, and we emerged from the cave with, I think, a new appreciation for the importance of seeking truth.
Yeah.
What does it all mean? What's the takeaway for us here in the 21st century?
I think the biggest takeaway is that building a just and harmonious world starts with each of us. It's about cultivating wisdom, courage, and moderation within ourselves, and then using those virtues to create a better world for everyone.
So it's not just about changing laws and systems, but about changing ourselves, about becoming more just and enlightened individuals.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that we're all interconnected and that our actions have ripple effects throughout the community.
Right.
Plato challenges us to be more thoughtful, more critical, and more courageous in our pursuit of truth and justice.
Wow. That's a pretty inspiring message to end on. Thanks for taking us on this deep dive into Plato's Republic. I feel like I've learned so much, and I'm definitely going to be pondering these ideas for a long time to come.
It's been a pleasure exploring these ideas with you. And remember, listeners, this is just the tip of the philosophical iceberg.
Right.
If you're intrigued by Plato's Republic, there's a whole world of philosophical inquiry waiting to be discovered.
So keep diving deep, everyone. And thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive.